It was the morning of All Saints Day, 98, when that old blind dog started roaming around the graveyard. Wouldn't have bothered me so much, worry not walking on his hind legs and smoking cigars. Recite my lineage and genealogy, you've got to know your history, son of Virginia.
Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 89.
Number 732.
Dave's here.
Everyone knows Dave's here.
Yes.
700, at least he did something good. Like 732 is not usually as insulting as what he does, like, number 12 or something like that,
Yeah, see, I wanted to go out the gate strong. I got the Hornsby in already within 3 seconds of the podcast, and we're good.
Dude, you've been playing the Hornsby before we even started recording.
I was getting my soundboard ready, okay?
So, as you can hear, everyone, Dave is here.
Hey.
As well as Ping and Michelle, both with us.
The core group is here today.
Maybe they're here. I'm not sure. They both went to sleep.
We had to sleep through the new year. It was exhausting. The winter days are too short and the nights are very long. So we were hibernating.
Wasn't yesterday the shortest day of the year or something like that? Yesterday. But now I gave away that we're not actually recording this podcast.
That's why I was like, pause.
Epic fail.
Delete.
Chris, you're kind of used to being the shortest in everything.
Yes, at 6'3", I'm usually the shortest in everything.
I wasn't speaking on that, but that's fine.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
Yes, and a 4-day class. Actually, your class is only 2 days, isn't it, Mr. Kennedy?
Actually, this year is the first year that I don't know if I got accepted or not, but I switched it to a 4-day class this year.
He just has to compete against you all the time.
I know. It's okay.
We understand where he has a shortfall.
I love Dave. It's okay. So this is released for the new year. So how was everyone's 2016?
It went by very quickly and it was hectic, but I thought it was good.
How was yours, Dave?
Pretty amazing, man. Companies are doing really well. Have some great folks I work with. I think all together, I think it was a pretty awesome 2016. I'm actually currently in a cottage in the middle of nowhere with snow all around me, kind of hanging out with the family. So I can't complain. I had a great 2016.
Yeah, you hired like everyone in the whole community. So,
yep, Chris, when you come on board, man.
Hey, you never know. Be less stressful.
That's true.
Although I cannot imagine.
Hey, Michelle, I'm going to talk to you after this, okay?
Oh.
Make sure you have a plum hiring bonus. Otherwise, you're not likely to make him, leave his current gig.
Gotcha.
You cannot steal Michelle from me. It's just that's against all rules, all friend rules ever.
Michelle, we have free Teslas when you join. Just saying.
Free Teslas.
She hasn't even responded to you, Dave.
The cost of electricity here is high.
Dave has my cell phone number. Call me.
Oh, that hurts.
Oh, snap.
That hurts. Wow. Well, you guess who's not getting a bonus this year?
Michelle, it would be baked into your contract, though, that you'd have to listen to Hornsby at least once a month.
Oof. That may be a point of contention, but we can talk.
No, she'll be needing a job after that last comment. So you should call her. You should call her after we hang up. Well, yeah, 2016 was quite good for us. Busy. Fourth quarter just about near killed us.
But you're still alive, so that means it made you stronger.
It did. We have a really, really good team, actually. In January, we are doing our corporate event in Orlando. So I'll let you guys know how that went in February.
Oh, am I actually coming to that or not?
Do you work for me?
At times I do.
You do. That's true. You do work for me at times.
Can I come too, Chris?
Yeah.
Can I put a booth? Can I put a recruiting booth outside?
It's a corporate. You want to recruit my people?
But come on now. Come on. So he's stealing your people and he's going to crash your party.
That's great. He put a recruiting booth out my own corporate. That would be the best prank ever.
That would be pretty awesome.
A trusted sec recruiting booth right outside my corporate event.
I'm going to add right here that we have a ropes course planned, and so the discussion after this is going to be very interesting to see if there were any, grave injuries, hospitalizations, etc. So yeah, next podcast ought to be really interesting.
Yeah, I rented a whole ropes course place, 40 feet in the air, team building exercises all being planned for us by the people down there. And we have like 3 people that are deathly afraid of heights.
No, this is great because it is about overcoming fears and support, but I don't know if you will have like peer pressure.
No, we're hoping to do it not like in a, hey, you're a wimp kind of thing, more of a supporting each other. It's not a competition. Actually, Michelle really helped with that because some of the things I had planned were more competitive, and now we took those out of the element. Because we don't work in an office. We're all separate. We work from our homes. We're trying to build this event so it's more building each other up, not competitive.
Trips to the emergency room are always bonding.
That will bond us, don't you think, Michelle? I think we should even go to the emergency room.
I anticipate calls to 911.
I think we should do group stitches.
But you hate needles, Chris. We've already established this.
No.
He haven't passed out, though.
No.
What did he care?
That's true. That's true.
Listen, I could do acupuncture. That's not a problem. But if we're talking about needles and veins, that's terrible. I can't even talk about it. Okay.
Well, we're talking about stitching and like watching the needle go in with a little piece of thread and like pulling your flesh together. Wait, come on.
You stop, okay? Let's talk about something else. And then we also hired Amy Herman to come down.
Wait, I just want to say that I think I just learned something new about Chris and what he's afraid of. So I'm going to be sending him some strange things here soon.
Oh man, thanks, Ping.
I'm really excited about this. Actually, I mean, I can get like movie clips and things like that. In his class, randomly playing videos that have.
I am going to have hordes of clowns at the next DerbyCon.
You know what? At least you are not afraid of clowns, and in which case he would get a horde of clowns to show up.
I'm not afraid of clowns. I'm okay with clowns. Dave is the one who's afraid of clowns, but...
Oh, we can do a horde of clowns at his class then.
Oh, yeah.
I'm serious.
Wait, I don't understand why this is all about me now all of a sudden. We were talking about Chris here, and we had a good plan going.
I tried to hire Michelle on my podcast and then offered to put a recruiting booth outside my corporate event.
Listen.
You know what? Just stick Dave with the cost of the event because he's going to be the supporting sponsor.
Dave's going to be the supporting sponsor of my corporate event?
That's right.
Yes.
No, I'm good. I got it all taken care of. I'm happy. It's going to be a lot of fun. So February, we'll have good stories to tell you, I hope. Or we'll have lots of stories of us in the emergency room.
Kira, I'll make it about me. I shot a duck yesterday. I went out and I was the only one with the entire group. We went duck hunting and I was the only one that shot the duck with a 28 gauge at 40 yards out.
Very nice.
You know I'm completely against that, right?
All the men were shooting 12 gauges. And they're all missing. And I just waited and I went bam and that duck went down.
Did you eat the duck?
We have it frozen.
Nice. I love duck.
That's messed up, guys. Being a vegetarian, I don't condone this.
But we're eating what we shot.
Oh, that's right. Dave is a vegetarian.
What did that duck do to you?
He quacked.
It flew in my line of sight and broke the horizon. Disturbed my early morning enjoyment.
And he played Hornsby, probably.
Yes. That was going through my mind.
Yeah. He was a Hornsby lover. So I condone it. I condone it.
You know what? All right, I think that's like. Yeah, I think I'm done with that. I can't do any more Hornsby because I already did 3 of those.
That's beautiful because our guest is coming on.
That is limit. All right, should we go on? Let us continue on with the march of what's happening in Q1 2017.
Q1, we have our APSE class down in Orlando where we will all be. That is not sold out as of yet, although I think there's only 5 or 6 slots left, if I have to be honest. I'd have to check the exact numbers, but let's just go with that. It's February 6 through 10. And the MLSE class, which is in March, I know I keep bringing this up, and Michelle keeps yelling at me, but it's already sold out, so sorry about that. And then June 5 through 9 is our APSE class in Bristol, UK, which is half filled as of now, which is really crazy. That's the first year we've ever had this, where our class in June was half filled before the new year even started. So that's kind of cool. And we're still waiting to hear about Black Hat, so that's why it's not on the site yet. I've actually had a couple people email me about that already. And just for anyone listening, don't ask. I can't save you a spot at Black Hat. I don't have any pull with them. Ping is gone. So I can't call Black Hat and say, please put one spot aside for my buddy. I can't do that. I don't have that power. So if we get invited back to Black Hat, it will be on the website. And then, I just say, get it quick because it's usually 3 weeks.
Before it's completely full. Well, that's actually a week longer than you used to have. It's getting better, I suppose.
That's true. We had 2 weeks, usually our first couple years.
Registration for Black Hat will probably open February 1 or February 15th, the first part. So anyone who wants a seat in that class or for Mr. Kennedy's class, if they are being offered, should jump on it.
Well, I think one of the things we also ought to just mention is the fact that we're going to be launching the SE Village site when DEF CON launches. And so people need to be looking for that as well, because we'll have the SECTF and the SE Village and hopefully our speaker track again. So that's something that we expect to see relatively soon.
Yeah, I really enjoy that. It's a good time. So, I'm looking forward to the SE Village again next year. And I'm actually going to submit a talk for DEF CON this year, I think. I skipped last year.
Because you have so much time. Because you're hiring everyone's employees.
That's right.
To do all the work.
That's right, Michelle.
And at DEF CON, we have some more stuff this year, which made my team super happy. We're updating the Mission SE Impossible, which will be on Thursday. SECTF is still going to be back. We're planning that as of now. That's going to be ridiculous this year. We're still doing the SE track, for all the speeches for DEF CON Human Track there. But we have the SECTF for kids and our new event, the SECTF for teens. Because all of the kids that originally came to the SECTF for kids are now too old, and they're begging us to continue the path and keep torturing them.
So wait, what are the age breakdowns?
So the SECTF for kids is 6 to 12, and the SECTF for teens is 13 to 16.
So you have to compete as an adult if you are 17. And what's the birthday cutoff? Is it December 1 or January 1? You should have that.
I don't think we went that detailed. It's me. I don't think we went that detailed. I think it's more like.
Do you count the 9 months in the womb as well? And what if someone had an early birth?
And it's like if they celebrate. If the kid says I'm 12, then you can be a SECTF for kids.
No, because the whole Chinese gymnastic team, they had that big age gate a couple years ago at the Olympics.
But we're at DEF CON. We're not the Olympics, Ping.
But everyone's trying social engineering. You're going to have 18-year-olds saying they're 14.
Well, that may be true, but
And if they look like Chinese gymnasts, we'll think that they're 6. So.
Yeah, that's it. We'll ask them for their passports. We'll ask all the kids to send us the pictures of their passports before we let them compete.
But Dave, we would love to have you, spend more time in SE Village, because one thing you did miss last year was Chris almost fainting when I was implanted with a chip. And this is how the whole fear of needles thing came up.
There's about 13 people who put it on YouTube taking videos of it, so you don't have to actually miss it. It's there.
Did they cut the chip out of you too?
No, she's still
it's
chipped.
Still there. I'm chipped just like a pet.
She has an RFID hand. It's ridiculous.
So at least you're not saying that aliens are speaking to you through the chip.
If I'm lost and picked up by the Humane Society, I'll be returned to my owner.
I actually can track her now, so I know when she's working and not. Thanks to that chip.
Dave, are you going to require this of all your employees?
I was lining up my next soundboards because I can't play Bruce Hornsby, so I got Psychedelic Furs and some Tears for Fears next. But yeah, it's going to be required for all employees.
Chip? Really? Okay. Well, I guess I'll never be working for Dave. I don't have an 11 gauge needle shoved into my body at any point in time.
Yeah, Chris. You know what I'm going to start doing? I'm just going to walk around with a needle behind you from now on.
Needles don't freak me out. It's watching them go into a vein. if you're going to be puncturing yourself nonstop, I guess we'll see how that goes. We'll see who loses
No
first,
issue with that
Dave.
whatsoever. Like, that does not bother me at all.
And there may be a rumor that we're running an SE Village at DerbyCon next year if we're invited.
Well, if they pays you enough money, where are your negotiation skills that I taught you?
I don't have any when it comes to Dave for some reason.
Ugh. That's why Michelle's going to end up going to work for him, because he's just going to take her from you.
Ooh, I'm sensing the challenge.
But, like, he's going to get you to sign some piece of paper, and then, like, suddenly Chris is going to be like, so, Michelle, tomorrow morning when you report to Dave.
Well, my question is whether or not Michelle will actually be allowed to go work with Chris at the CTF Village, since, you know, she'll be an employee and everything of mine. So I have to make sure I can dedicate the time.
Conflict of interest.
Real
That
nice.
was the brittle sound of Chris's heart breaking.
Yes, it was. It is.
See, if he had no heart like me, then there would be no sound.
We're all so mean.
I guess, you know, if Michelle wants to go work for Dave and be subjected to Hornsby.
I don't know why the musical sounds of Bruce Hornsby and the enchantment and enlightenment of that music is a bad thing.
Because in 89 episodes of this podcast, I think we've only had 2 guests that actually liked Bruce Hornsby.
And they happen to be my favorite guests.
Can you name them?
No.
Yeah, well, when we get Brad on. Yeah, that's a good one.
Brad is here, and we can ask him.
I am here and trying to decide how much I should like Bruce Hornsby.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't.
The vote should be no.
You shouldn't. We should probably introduce our guest. I didn't even do that. Let's talk about Brad. Brad is a researcher, Brad Sagarin, Dr. Brad Sagarin. He's a professor of psychology at Northern Illinois University, who has been, man, you've been doing research for actually quite a while, haven't you?
I have been. Yeah, I realized at some point just how many years I've been at NIU. It's, I guess, year 17 now. Yeah.
That's great. Congratulations on that. Well, the paper that I found, you had written all about influence and persuasion, and you actually had some help in writing it with Kevin Mitnick. That was the paper that I found that you had written, and that's how I reached out to you about coming on the podcast, and we eventually got it to work, and now here you are.
Well, it's good to be here. Yeah, getting a chance to work with Kevin on that paper was really a lot of fun and very eye-opening for me. You know, Kevin is such a talented social engineer and, you know, computer person. One of the things that just interacting with Kevin really demonstrated to me is just how powerful these social engineering tactics are. As he was describing the event that we talk about in the chapter, and then we kind of dissect it from a social psychological perspective, was Kevin's break-in of Motorola. And as he was describing it to me, I have to say that piece after piece of it just struck me as, you know what, I would have fallen for this. You know what, if I were the target of this, I would have totally given him that information. And I think that really showed me at a very, I guess, visceral level how powerful these techniques are.
You know, interestingly, when we talk to people often about social engineering, sometimes they start off and saying, well, yeah, I really would never fall for that. But then you start telling stories about some of the attacks, and then you can see it in their face, just exactly what you said. You know, I probably would fall for that, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's one of the things that makes them so powerful. And one of the other things that I thought was so interesting in talking with Kevin was that the principles that he was making use of, and I think that he was using them at a very intuitive level, went right back to many of the principles of influence that social psychologists have studied, and really some of the central 6 principles, for instance, that Bob Cialdini writes about in Influence, Science, and Practice. And Kevin really used those in a very effective way, even though, of course, he wasn't referencing at the time the psychological literature, but he was still making very effective use of the techniques.
Yeah, now that's interesting, because we had Doc Cialdini on the podcast just a couple of months ago, because that is work that Michelle and I use in our training all the time, which, by the way, is Dave Kennedy, who will play Bruce Hornsby and make you have filled with intense rage.
So this is an important question. This is a very important question, Brad. Do you like Bruce Hornsby?
That's the music that you use for the intro to your show?
No, the intro to our show is Clutch. Don't
Okay,
ever
sorry
insult
about that.
Clutch again. You need to go and do penance now.
I
Okay.
am showing my age. They talk about music taste being crystallized when people are in their, teens and 20s, and mine got crystallized with Styx and Yes, I'm proud to say. So,
Brad, this is around the same time frame. So let me know if you know this song. Okay, let's listen to this one here. Okay, you
all
ready?
right.
No, he doesn't want to hear this.
See, that's a good one.
Okay.
Brad,
His enthusiasm is overwhelming, Dave.
I
Brad,
love to
just so
hear
you
more.
know, Styx Cornerstone was one of the first albums I ever bought, so I completely feel you.
Okay, well, thank you. I feel a little better now.
No, we don't mind. We all. I grew up in the 70s too. I don't mind it, but Bruce Hornsby is just one of those. I don't know. There's really nothing there.
Are you kidding me? Did you just hear what I just played?
Maybe there could have been a like of the music, but like if when you're a kid and your parents made you eat peas every day, you grew up hating peas because they're just forced down your throat for hours at a time. Well, that's what Dave has done.
I don't know what analogy you're starting with here. I don't. It's not coming together,
He's
Chris.
forced Bruce Hornsby down the throats of our listeners, so they have all begun to dislike him. But maybe we should talk about that's not influence. That's more manipulation, isn't it, Brad?
Well, it's kind of a reverse thing if you get them tired of it that way. Although, if you switch and take it away, it'd be interesting to see if they miss it.
Yeah, why don't we try that, Dave? Why don't you take it away for a year, and we'll tell you at the end of the year if we actually miss Bruce Hornsby. We should do that as a study. What do you think,
Brad? I'm not liking you yet, man.
How about you don't insult the guest, Dave? How about
sorry,
you
Dave.
don't insult the guest?
All right, back to the deep dive
back to the study. Okay, so you were cross-referencing Cialdini's work with this story that Mitnick was telling you about breaking into Motorola, and were you seeing clear, defined areas that he was using the 6 principles that Cialdini defines in his attack vectors?
Yeah, very much. That Kevin was, effectively leveraging reciprocity, where he would do a favor for somebody. And in one instance, he teaches over the phone a target that he's looking to get something from, how to use a couple of computer programs. And then she feels a reciprocal obligation to then comply with the request that Kevin does. Kevin, one of, I think, the best ones that he uses is scarcity, where he does an attack by telling somebody that they have lost access to their files and are going to be without access for, I think, about a month. And of course, who can be without their files for a month for work purposes. And so that scarcity sends the target into panic. And he's then in much less of a position to resist when Kevin basically wheedles his password out of him. So really, I think down the line, Kevin's attack on Motorola made use of the Cialdini 6 principles of influence in a very effective way. And I think in a way that really nicely demonstrates how those principles work.
Did you find that there was one principle that seemed to work better than the others in your research?
I think that they all have their domain of effectiveness. And one of them, I think, if I kind of go through the various things that Kevin did in his attack on Motorola, that it may be that liking was one of the most powerful ones, because by picking up small bits of information, finding the name of somebody's coworker or the name of somebody's manager or some Motorola jargon, that he was able to kind of slip that into conversation and create a sense that he was in the same in-group as the target. And once you're within the same in-group as another person is, that confers lots and lots of benefits. The other person likes you more, they trust you more, they give you credibility. And so I think that was really a very effective way to quickly build trust and then leave people open to the types of requests that were being made.
Yeah, that's interesting because, we oftentimes will study some of our attack vectors, especially, let's say, with phishing, where we do a lot of work with customers in phishing, and we'll try to look at what principles are being used and why it's successful and what makes certain fish successful. Like you said, the one when he used scarcity, where he made it feel like they were going to be out of their account for a while, as opposed to reciprocity, which is a pretty happy, like you're making someone feel good for having given them something. So they want to give you something in return. And then trying to determine if a population, let's say an industry or a company, is more susceptible to a certain type of influence. as opposed to other types of influence?
I think that a lot of it, though, depends upon the particular situation. So as a social engineer, what information do you have? Do you have inside information that can set up a social bond? Do you have something to offer the person that you could then extract a reciprocal obligation in return? Is there a way that you can, either manufacture or kind of highlight time pressure or limited information in a way that will get scarcity going? Can you extract a small favor for somebody and then use that to kind of leverage into a larger favor later, a commitment and consistency related tactic? So I think that all of them have their power. And a lot of it depends upon what information the social engineer has going in, and then also what's the nature of the interaction. Part of what I think is kind of a hallmark of effective social engineers is at some level the flexibility to gauge the interaction and figure out what is the best thing to bring to bear. Because I think that if somebody goes in saying, okay, this is my script, this is what I'm going to say, it's possible that it's going to work, but it is also very possible that the conversation will simply go in a different direction and that a different tactic or a different way of using the tactic would have been more effective.
I think that's a great point. We often, in our services for our clients, we talk to our staff about maintaining flexibility. I think there's some security in maintaining a script because you know exactly what you're going to say and you know exactly how you're going to make your request. But as you said, conversations tend to be relatively fluid. And so for someone, the most skilled social engineers really do have that ability to jump back and forth between types of requests and to make those requests based on the responses that they're getting from their target.
And in a sense, it's reminiscent for me of the way that really skilled judo and jujitsu practitioners do their art. Because really what they're doing is responding to the movement and momentum of their opponent and then making use of that to sort of redirect it to execute a throw or to redirect it in a way that puts on a hold or a choke or something like that. And that somebody who goes into a match with too much expectation going in of what they're going to do will likely be too slow and not reactive enough. So I think that flexibility is very important, but that unfortunately, in a sense, takes a fairly high level of skill, comfort, and trust in oneself to be able to see what's there and then respond accordingly.
And this is human nature, it's the way we work as people. So how can you train someone to realize when influence is being used in a way that is not beneficial to them?
That's a great question. And there are a number of ways that, for example, that Bob Cialdini recommends in terms of people's responses to influence tactics. And one of the key ones that I think offers some help in resisting social engineering is to pay attention to kind of what's in the pit of your stomach. That if somebody asks you for something and at some level you feel a social obligation to give it to them, but if you look a little deeply, you're uncomfortable with doing that, that should be a clue to say maybe you're being manipulated and maybe this is something that you should step back and think about before complying or deciding not to comply. Because I do think that there are times where we do either pick up on the fact that what's going on here just is not completely on the up and up. The way that this person is approaching me is not the way that a colleague at this company typically does, or that they're asking me for something that at some level I know I really shouldn't provide. And I think that trying to make use of that can potentially be effective. Now, one of the challenges of that is that an effective influence professional, and here I mean both an effective social engineer, but also an effective salesperson and so on, will often use tactics that will raise somebody's level of arousal. And so when somebody is emotionally aroused, they don't necessarily have the same access to their cognitive faculties that they could use to bring to bear to resist those tactics. And this is what happens when, and I've been the target and the effective target of this kind of thing, is that this is where I'll go ahead and buy something, paying more for something than I should. And as I'm walking away, I'll realize exactly what it was that I fell prey to. But it's just that it's difficult to get access to that information and bring up that resistance in the middle of the situation.
Yeah, and you kind of, if you blend some of the research you've done and Cialdini's research and influence, and then you take like the research from Daniel Goleman about amygdala hijacking, you can understand when you trigger this type of emotional response in someone, it shuts down their ability to think rationally and logically.
Absolutely.
Everything you just said, the defense is having to stop and think during the time that you're being influenced, but that's not the easiest thing to teach people to do.
Well, that's true. And so the approach that we've taken in our research in terms of building resistance is, in a sense, to make use of the fact that emotion can at some level fight emotion. And the reaction that we're trying to make use of that will help somebody resist is the negative reaction that people feel when they feel like they're being manipulated. So what we try to do, for example, in one set of studies that we did is build up resistance against illegitimate authority-based advertisements. And so an authority-based advertisement is just an ad, TV ad, print ad, what have you, that includes a spokesperson who is trying to speak with some level of expertise. And in a lot of ads, this is legitimate. The person in the ad is a real doctor with real credentials, and it makes sense for us to listen to what that doctor has to say about medical advice. However, authorities are sometimes used in an illegitimate manner. Either it's somebody who is just dressed up to look like a doctor. I mean, one of the best examples is the "I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV." But then, of course, the person proceeds to dispense medical advice. Or you get somebody who is, in fact, an expert, but is speaking outside of their area of expertise. So what we tried to do is build up resistance against these types of illegitimate authority-based messages. And to do that, what we found is we had to teach people to distinguish legitimate from illegitimate authorities, but that didn't work. When we did that, it turned out that that made the ads containing the legitimate authorities more persuasive, but people didn't actually bother to resist the illegitimate ones. To get them to do that, what we had to do was dispel their illusion of invulnerability to advertising. The problem being that many people, as I think it sounds like you find in your training, when people walk in and say, well, I know this social engineering works, but it wouldn't work on me. What we found in our research is that we had to show somebody, no, you personally are vulnerable. And that when we show them that in an unambiguous and undeniable way, they then are motivated to build resistance because now they feel like a fool and they want to not feel like a fool in the future.
So the problem is not necessarily the skill of the attacker. The problem is the target feeling like they're invulnerable.
Exactly. That's right. It's the target feeling invulnerable, which ironically leaves them more vulnerable because they figure, why do I have to resist? I'm not going to get hit by anything.
So ego is the killer.
Yeah, we have to punch our clients in the face, Michelle.
Well, it's classic, though, right? Isn't that the classic resistance you get from actually the executives in a company? All of my people need to have security awareness training, but I should be exempt from it.
That's right. And that's it. It's a illusion of unique invulnerability, an illusion of unique personal invulnerability. So it's like I look around and I see all the rubes around me and I know they're all affected by this. But I know when I look at myself that I am personally invulnerable. And it's that piece that you need to break down. The tricky thing, and I'm very curious actually how you manage this in your training, is that when you make somebody feel like a fool, they're going to feel pretty angry. And it's a subtle thing to get them to direct that anger in the right place. Because if they just get angry with you, or in our research with me as the researcher, that's not going to be terribly productive. It just means they're not going to sign up for another one of my studies. What I have to do is make them angry with the advertiser. Like, this is the person who tried to manipulate you, and you don't want that to happen again. And those are the people that we found in our research that build up substantial resistance against illegitimate authorities.
Yeah, it's an interesting question you pose, and we've struggled with this back and forth for years. So the answer, I'm going to focus on education-based training, right? So not penetration testing, where to me a penetration test is it's a whole different set of rules because you're testing vulnerability in a network sense. So a lot of times the goal is not education, it's to find the holes that need to be patched, right? But when we're talking about educating a person, and let's use phishing for an example, our rule within our company is to never use negatively based influence or manipulation. So no fear-based pretext, no threats, no feeling of harm or loss. We find that reduces the target's anger response to the attack. And then we offer immediate education upon failure. So, for example, they click the link in the phishing email or open the document, and they're automatically offered with positive education and positive reinforcement on what they need to do with the action they just took. So to combine all of that, no fear-based pretexts. We don't then laugh at them and point and go, haha, look how stupid you are, you clicked it. Instead, it's positive reinforcement with, hey, you're part of this great education program for the company, and we want you to take these actions to continue supporting the security of your organization and, offer them some education that does not make them feel like their jobs or livelihood are in danger. That's not 100% fix, right? So it doesn't say that 100% of the time no one ever gets upset, because that would be a complete lie, but it reduces it, I would say, by a huge percentage over the years from what we've seen in handling in that way. It reduces it to a very low percentage of people. And usually when someone does get very angry, we can follow a path to find out why that happened. For example, they did not read the education. They reacted before they actually went to the education page, or they didn't follow through properly with the phishing email. So there was anger at that, things to that extent.
Those are really good techniques. One of the nice things that's in there as well, in addition to a variety of things that will make somebody feel emotionally more comfortable right away, is that you then take that teachable moment and use that moment of feeling of vulnerability to offer them a fix, that here's what you can do to protect yourself in the future from having this happen again. So I think that's really good. We use some similar things. And one of the other things that we found is also helpful is to quickly generalize the people that are targets of this, so that even though we've demonstrated that this one participant is uniquely and personally vulnerable, they are part of a large group of people. In fact, everybody falls prey to this type of thing. And that if we do that, then that we have found is also very helpful from leaving them feeling uniquely personally foolish, because then they can't deny that they did fall prey to it, but at the same time they realize that many, many other people do as well, and that's certainly social proof information that leaves people, we have found, feeling more comfortable.
I would agree with that. And one of the things that we kind of focus on, and this is totally non-enforceable, but it's something that at least Michelle and I in our company, we stand by, is when we're interviewing a potential client to work with us, we tell them that part of our contract is that no one can be fired for the results of our testing. We've had multiple people tell us this is completely unenforceable. There's nothing we can do about it if they fire people. But it starts a very positive conversation with the company about the goals that they have. And if we find that their goals are not related to helping their population get better, then there has been times where we've walked away from a client, where we said, this is not the job for us because we're not really into helping you just locate what you consider to be the weak ones and get rid of them. Now, with that said, I get some criticism sometimes from people, but that's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, heck, if we find someone stealing your company secrets, or downloading pornography on your network, or downloading things that can be malware ridden, sure, get rid of them. We're not totally oblivious to the dangers that people can, but falling for a social engineering attack to me is not a good enough reason to fire people, because the next human you hire is going to be just as vulnerable as the last human you just got rid of.
That's right. And you'd be firing 90% of your company.
Exactly. In our ratios, we literally tell them that month one, be prepared to fire 79 to 84% of your people if that's your goal, because that's our success ratio starting off with a company. So if that's what you want, go, be prepared for that. So we find that when we get to word things this way, it helps us also position our education so it is more on the positive influence basis. That helps us with the messaging, because what you said makes people feel like they're strengthened and empowered as opposed to humiliated and embarrassed.
Right. And, and you can't protect somebody entirely from any negative reaction to this, but frankly, they should feel a little bit of a negative reaction to it. You just ideally then need to point that negative reaction in the right direction as a motivation to make them learn and make them realize that they really, do need to learn, because, it doesn't feel good to get tricked, even if you realize that lots of other people are getting tricked by this thing as well. But if you then teach me how to protect myself, then I'll probably feel okay about it.
Yeah. Well, how do you deal, like in your research, did you have times where maybe you had a situation where no matter what you did, somebody was just really upset
What we try to do, and I think that in a sense, this comes out mostly in research that we do that involves deception. One of the things that social psychologists are kind of known for is the fact that we do a lot of deceptive research where we bring somebody into a lab. It's an artificial social environment, and yet we're trying to create real emotions in that lab. So we're trying to make somebody feel real jealousy, or we're trying to make somebody lie to a target in the context of the lab. And to do that, we often need to lie to them. And one of the ethical obligations when you do research where you deceive people, participants, is that you have to do a debriefing at the end where you bring somebody down gently and essentially tell them what was really going on. And there are times where somebody is upset about that. In one piece of research that I did where we were looking at the effect of a person lying to a target, and what we found in the research is that when somebody lies to a target, the liar actually starts seeing the target of the lie as less honest. And that effect is exacerbated if the lie is seen to cause the target damage. So we set up a fairly complicated methodology in order to basically manipulate somebody into lying to a target during the course of the experiment. And at the end of the experiment, we had to reveal things, sort of lift the curtain and show people what was going on. And some people were upset about having been deceived. They felt kind of embarrassed and so on. And what we would then do is take whatever amount of time was necessary to really talk with them about what we did, why we did it. And one of the things I think that we found most useful is to try to bring them onto our side in terms of asking them, for example, so, this is the research question that we're looking at. Can you think about any other ways that we might be able to answer this research question without having to use the kind of deception that we did? Social psychologists only use deception if we absolutely need to. But what do you think? And often the person will kind of sit back and reflect and say, no, you know what, this probably is the way you need to answer that question. And at that point, you really have kind of brought them onto our side. And we find that that's a good way of really getting people to feel more comfortable with what happened. And another one, and I think this really harkens back to what we were talking about earlier, is to let people know that pretty much everybody lies in this situation, that we manipulated a situation that left you no choice but to do that. And so I think then that helps remove some of the sting of it, because of course people don't like being caught in a lie. But if they realize that essentially this was a situation that everybody lies in, then they will hopefully feel more comfortable with it.
So if you make them part of the tribe, they now don't look at you as the enemy, but as they're there to help you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a nice piece of knowledge that we can use.
So, Brad, out of curiosity, how well do you feel you resist attempts at influence? Because you're in this field of study, you understand how it works. So, how would you rate yourself?
Oh gosh, not that great. I actually remember there was a point where I was in graduate school and I had recently picked up a hobby of playing a lot and then starting to buy pinball machines. And I was interested in buying a pinball machine called Twilight Zone. Went around and found a Twilight Zone that was in good shape. It was in an arcade in a dying shopping mall. Turns out that's a really great place to get pinball machines. I went in there to negotiate the price. So I talked with the person behind the counter and we worked out a price. And then I left and came back a couple of days later with a friend of mine who really knows pinball machines. At the time, I was kind of a novice, so I wanted him to look it over. And also he had a truck, so he could help me get it back to my place. And so I went in there, he checked it out, gave me the thumbs up, and I went to purchase it. And the guy said, oh, you know what? Actually, I talked to our management and I can't sell it to you for that. And I was going to buy it for $1,500. And he said, no, we have to sell it to you for $1,600. Now, I was in graduate school studying influence with Bob Cialdini, and in my brain, like this sign went up saying, you're being lowballed right now, like this is happening right now. And it worked because all of the reasons why that technique worked were coming to bear. It's like I was there. I had already essentially in my mind bought the pinball machine. I had my friend there with his truck. I had told a bunch of my friends I was going to buy this thing. And there was so much weight in the deal for me that I just wasn't comfortable or willing to walk away. Now, I did decide that I wasn't going to be able to show my face back in Bob's lab if I didn't at least extract a little bit of negotiation. And so I said, look, I'm not going to give you $1,600. I'm really not happy with what's going on here, but I'll give you $1,550.
$50 was your sell point.
That's something. He's so emotionally invested and he's there and it is something, right? Meet me halfway. Let me just get out of here with my pride intact.
Exactly. My tattered remnants of pride, whatever. And so, but here's the thing is that what happened next should have absolutely clued me in that I was getting taken. And what happened next was that I said, okay, I'll be willing to give you $1,550. And the guy did not go in back to call management. He just thought about it for a second and said, yeah, we can do that.
And pocketed the $50.
Exactly. And I handed him the $1,550, wheeled the machine out, and on the drive, I'm like, ugh, I totally got taken. And yeah, so anyway.
So you knew that your pride was only cost $50.
Right, but where was your friend who should have said, I thought you told me he was going to sell it to you for 15?
I should have brought that in because actually one of the good ways of helping you resist is to bring in a friend who is not financially part of a deal, be it a car that you're purchasing or what have you, because they can come in and really keep a much more objective state of mind and can clue you in if you're being manipulated, as I was. I don't know. My friend was off like playing Pac-Man or something. I don't know. He certainly didn't rescue me from that one. And obviously that was embarrassing. I'm feeling a little years later, a little embarrassment right now telling you the story. But I think that for me, one of the things that it really showed is knowledge of these tactics doesn't necessarily offer resistance. These things are powerful. And I have had times where I feel like my knowledge of a tactic has helped me resist. But there have also been times when I still fall prey to them because, they work. And I'm a particular sucker for scarcity. If I feel like something, an opportunity is being taken from me, I'm certainly going to try to grasp onto it. I've at least had a couple of times where I've noticed that feeling and said, okay, Brad, take a step back. This offer will be available tomorrow. Like I know this person just said it's today only, but it's not like if you walk back into this store tomorrow that, he's not going to be willing to sell it to you. And so that's helped now and again, but no, I'm not perfect at resisting this stuff.
My knowledge only helps me in the the post briefing where I've already made the purchase and I can name every single principle that was used against me, and yet I still made the purchase. So I'm with you. I feel you.
I'm laughing because Michelle and I always talk about this. Like scarcity is her weakness, and mine's reciprocity. If someone's nice to me, I have a really hard time not doing something else for them that they ask. And I know it's happening, right? I can see it. I can see it happening. And then if I put on like QVC for Michelle, she will spend every dime in her bank account on that last George Foreman grill or whatever, and then someone says something nice to me and then they ask me for something and I can see it in my head. I'm like, no, I know what's happening, but the words that are coming out of my mouth are all, yes, I will do this for you.
Well, and I think that with reciprocity, actually, that's one of the ones where I think some of the recommendations that Bob Cialdini offers are very helpful. Because one of the things that he recommends with reciprocity is to try to realize if you are feeling a reciprocal obligation because of something that somebody has just given you, and you realize you don't want that thing, like, the kind of prototypical person has come up and like handed you a flower or a book and asks for a donation in return. That person has done a manipulative influence tactic against you. And if you can quickly reframe it as that, like this person was not in the goodness of their heart giving me this book or giving me this flower, they are doing this in a scripted way to make me feel obligated to give them something in return. I've at least found that that's pretty helpful in terms of resisting, because I don't feel an obligation to respond kindly to somebody's attempt to manipulate me.
That part, that's easy, right? If someone does that on the street, that's an easy one for me to withstand. It's like when someone actually comes up and says something really nice to you or about your work that you've done and you feel really validated. And then it could even be a day later or a month later. This happens to me all the time. If someone come up to me at a conference and say, oh man, I really love your book. Thanks so much for writing it. And then a month later get an email, hey, can you read my college thesis and tell me what you think? And I'm like, dang, I want to say no because it's 7 billion pages long and I don't know what to say to this person, or they'll email me and ask me for advice on their life, like what to do for work. And I'll just go to Michelle because I know she can help me with this one. Michelle, what do I do? Tell them you're not qualified and they'll leave you alone. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that is tough, especially because it sounds like in those examples, the initial compliment was legitimate and sincere. And so it wasn't a manipulative tactic. It's just that it then did, in fact, set up a bond and a reciprocal obligation that the person, kind of called in later. And those are tough to resist.
Yeah, exactly. And this question is interesting because Michelle asked you, or Ping asked you that question about, or Michelle, about how easy you can resist. And every time we have a professional that studies a certain area, we ask that. Like we asked Bob Cialdini if he was resistant to influence. He said the same thing. And we've had Dr. Ekman on the podcast and asked him if he can tell when someone's being deceptive with their facial expression. He said no. And every time we have a professional on, that a researcher that studies a certain area of human behavior, we ask them this question. And generally the answer is, yeah, no, I'm still a human. So I still fall for these things. It's kind of fascinating. Just knowing it doesn't make you quicker to resist the effects of it.
Well, and it's because of that when Kevin and I started brainstorming, when we wrote that chapter, and we were thinking about his attack on Motorola as well as other social engineering scenarios that he had done and that we had read about and were discussing. And we were trying to think like, okay, so what can we offer people in terms of help for resistance? And certainly one of the first things that we came up with is this idea of dispelling the illusion of invulnerability. But then the other ones that we came up with really got away from the idea of even trying to detect that you're being manipulated, because a skilled social engineer can set up a situation that makes it very difficult to know that you're being lied to. As Ekman certainly has found, that's not an easy thing to tell. We're not good at lie detection. And so what we were trying to do was to come up with some other recommendation. And kind of the other two that we came up with is, one was to have an organization or an individual, but we were really thinking kind of at the organizational level, think carefully about what is within that organization sensitive information and what is innocuous information that somebody having it should not confer for them any credibility. And so as a kind of regular real world example of that, I know, because it's so easy on Facebook and other social media to friend somebody, that if I get a friend request from somebody and we have 10 friends in common, I know that in a sense doesn't mean very much, that I shouldn't, just because we have 10 friends in common, offer them much trust or credibility just on the basis of that. Because I've labeled that as, in a sense, sort of innocuous, relatively meaningless information. Now, maybe I will be more likely to friend them, but I don't give them a lot of trust just because we have friends in common, because I know how easy it is to set that up. Similarly, if a company has a public directory, knowing the name of somebody's an employee at the company, or knowing, for instance, the employment hierarchy or structure, shouldn't necessarily connote any inside knowledge, because that's something that anybody could get. And so we recommend that companies try to distinguish and then teach their employees the difference between innocuous and sensitive information, both so that if somebody approaches them with innocuous information, they know this doesn't mean anything. You shouldn't trust this person just because they know these 5 other employee names. But furthermore, they know that innocuous information is not anything they personally need to protect. It's hard to be vigilant. And if, my employer asks me to protect everything I know about the company, that's going to be impossible and exhausting to try. Whereas if I know that, these classes of information are the ones that really need to be protected, I will be more likely to actually be able to comply with that and help protect that information. The other recommendation is to recognize the fact that a lot of the ways that social engineering seems to work is that it rests on the power of social norms, particularly things like politeness norms. So, just to pull an easy example, if somebody is going through a door that requires a key to open and somebody comes up right behind them, it is rude and uncomfortable to close the door in somebody's face. That's not what we do. You hold the door open so that they can get through as well. And so what companies would be well advised to do is to teach their employees polite ways to respond to situations like this, where they need their employees to do the right thing for security, but they also realize that these are not going to be comfortable things to do. And so if somebody asks for a piece of information that they're not entitled to, that's going to be an uncomfortable thing to say no to. But what a company needs to do is to offer a way of responding that allows them to maintain comfort with the interaction, but then still protect the information. And to give a little bit of a personal example of this, as a professor, of course, I grade students every semester. And I at one point got a call from the parent of one of my students who had passed but not gotten a great grade in the class, and his father asked me if I would be willing to change the grade. And of course, the grade was there for specific numerical reasons. I was uncomfortable with doing that. So then he turns around and he says, well, I'm actually also a professor. So I was wondering, as professional courtesy, if perhaps you could change the grade. And first of all, I was floored because wow, like that seems like a pretty rude request. But at the same time, it leveraged the kind of in-group thing and made it uncomfortable for me to say no. So I thought about it for a second, and the way that I managed to resist that was by turning the conversation around and saying, well, as a fellow professor, I know that you understand how important the integrity of a grading system is. And so I know that you can understand why it is that I really can't change this grade. And that left him with nothing to say. But it was a really uncomfortable conversation. And in a sense, I had to reframe at that point in real time in a way that let me get out of the conversation in a way that I felt socially comfortable, even though at some level it was such an inappropriate request that I probably was within my rights to just hang up or say, that is a remarkably inappropriate request. But yet lightness norms left me not feeling comfortable doing that. And so I had to maneuver a different way to get myself out of the conversation.
People are going to think that we paid you to say those two tips, because especially the first one. This is something Michelle and I have been preaching for, 5 years together about trying to teach employees the value of the information they possess. And that's something that a lot of times what companies will do is they'll leave it up to the employee to determine what's valuable or not. And that is just such a horrible way of going about it, because you're asking the employee to figure out what's confidential and what's not, what's dangerous and what's not. But I love the way you put it as giving them classifications, like this data needs to be protected with your life. This data, yeah, we don't really care about that. That will make it easier for the employee to determine if someone starts asking for this data and they're not validated and they're not authenticated, well, that probably means something wrong is going on in this phone call and we should stop it or give them some easy way to turn the conversation around. Really fascinating to hear that from a research point of view. And it's really, I say, validating for us and fascinating to hear that is one of the ways to resist negative parts of influence.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I really think that's a critical part of effective training in this domain. And I do think that then empowering somebody with the way to respond to those requests. What do you say in return that will get you off the phone in a way that you're going to feel comfortable? Because it's hard to say no to people. Especially if somebody is approaching you with what sounds like a reasonable request and, why am I going to be a jerk about this and not give them what they need? But if I have a script that I can come across with this thing that then makes me not feel like a jerk, and in fact, in a way can reframe it so that if the person keeps pushing me, they're the one who's a jerk, that can leave me a lot more comfortable saying no.
And that's hard because, we've heard people also give advice that that's what you need to do to resist social engineering, is just kind of be a jerk to everyone. And I agree with you. It's not a great solution because not everyone has the capacity to be that way.
Nor do we want to. What an awful place to work if you're in an organization where everybody's a jerk all the time.
Right, And that example you gave is a big one that we talk about all the time, like going up to a door. And we've used this a million times, going into companies, is put a box with a bunch of stuff in it, and you walk up to a door when a bunch of people are going in, and it is rare for someone to not hold the door open for you while you're carrying a box, or to even ask you to put the box down and show them your badge. Really, really uncommon to find someone that will go to that level.
I think human kindness just goes a long way based on culture, right? People just want to help you out. And I think, negative persuasion, in my opinion, is something that ruins somebody's day probably in most cases.
Yeah. And we don't want to train people to to be jerks, because it's nice to have employees that, with members of a company or an organization that are going to help each other out. We don't want to undermine that. But at the same time, we also need to get organizations to protect the information they need to protect and protect their sensitive facilities.
And that really is where it comes to the security professional, let's say, turning it back to that, is to help a company come up with more solid methodology to stay protected without creating an environment where everyone's taught to be a jerk to their fellow person. Because there are other ways where, you can have that situation where instead of letting someone tailgate in, where you can stop someone from giving them free access to a building, but without having to be totally rude about it too.
Yeah, and if you can think about ways to, give somebody the tools to respond to those situations in a way that will leave them feeling comfortable saying no and resisting, I think people are going to be a lot more likely to do that. And then of course in here, and I think this is implicit, is to show people why it matters. Like, why is it that you need to do this? Why is it that everybody who comes through that door needs to swipe their own personal key card? What's the risk if they don't? And because otherwise, certainly I've worked at companies where there are rules that seem totally arbitrary, and those are tough to comply with because why bother? Why do I need to fill out this form? Why do I need to get permission for this particular thing? And you have too many of those, and it's going to be tough to get people to comply with the things that you really need them to comply with.
Yeah, that is really the key to it. Is if you educate people on why it's important, then to me it adds more weight if they understand why they're doing this. Because sometimes people don't realize how important it is to take those actions, so they don't comply because they view it as something silly or arbitrary to follow.
Well, I think that goes into like an information security program. If you look at a lot of companies that try to implement like two-factor authentication, if you don't explain why you're doing two-factor authentication, people just assume you're trying to make it harder for them. So, we have a big problem with that in security, just communicating what we're trying to do and the reasons for it, to make things better, more secure, or to protect their information. And we don't relate to people in most cases. So it's very difficult in a lot of times to implement things in companies, both in IT, security, everything else.
So it's like we got to use the same principles of influence to get the right methodology for why security needs to be implemented, in addition to breaking in the company.
Dude, that's how I lived at Diebold. Like when I was at Diebold as the chief security officer, I was literally the communication specialist for our organization. Like, hey, we're doing this, and here's the reasons why. Feel free to call me. We're gonna have a 24-hour helpline, and we'd spend like 2 months just campaigning for it. Like literally, like we're campaigning for a presidency to get these initiatives, done in an organization. And when we did it, people were like, "Oh, that makes sense. I understand why you're doing that now." It actually was really effective.
So when people call, they just got like 6 minutes of Bruce Hornsby. That's what happens.
or 30 seconds.
Yeah. Figure. Oh, here we go. So Brad, this is such a fascinating topic. Okay, so I know people are going to want to know more about your research and more about you. So where can they go to find out more about you and your research and the new things you're working on and stuff like that?
Sure. My website, my kind of profile page is Sagarin, SAGARIN.socialpsychology.org. And I've got the chapter with Kevin Mitnick available there for download, as well as a number of our other papers. I also, can I give a quick shout out to kind of another line of research that at least some of your listeners might be interested in?
Please, we always welcome that.
So I do work in the area of social influence and resistance to persuasion. I also study human sexuality and then study statistics and research methodology. And some of the work that my colleagues and I do in the area of human sexuality, it can be found at our lab website at www.scienceofbdsm.com. And so anybody who might be interested in that line of research can find our papers and presentations and such there. So I'd say those are probably the two good sources for that.
One of the questions we always ask our guests is, because a lot of our listeners are avid readers, is if you have any books, and they don't have to be about the topic we just talked about. It can just be a book that you read that you really enjoyed reading and that you thought you'd like to share with the world. If there's any books out there that you could recommend.
Sure. So I've got a couple of recommendations. Needless to say, I would recommend books by Robert Cialdini. Influence Science and Practice was the book that I read that convinced me that he was the person I needed to study with in graduate school. And of course, his most recent book, Persuasion, are both well worth reading. He also, I think, has a remarkable talent at writing scientifically rigorous and informative books that are also page turners. And so I'd really recommend that listeners would read those. Kevin Mitnick's books are fascinating. His autobiography with William Simon, Ghost in the Wires, is well worth a read. And then getting away from those areas, there are two books by an author named Jerry Mander who were these books were pretty influential in getting me to think about technology in some different ways. And the first one is Four Arguments for the Elimination of Television, a book that in some sense is going to seem pretty anachronistic today, given the wealth of new media that we have. And his other book, In the Absence of the Sacred, The Failure of Technology and the Survival of the Indian Nations. And the big thing that these books gave to me was, as a computer science major as an undergraduate, I was surrounded by a lot of people who were really into technology, including myself. And one of the ideas that I think a lot of us had at the time was that technology is neutral, and that it is good or evil that people put the technology to, but that the technology itself is neutral. And I thought that Mander's two books give remarkably persuasive arguments about why that is not the case, and why certain technologies are very likely to move society and the world in certain directions, and that it would behoove us to think about those as we are developing and disseminating those technologies. And then the last book that I'd recommend, this is a piece of fiction, and I need to be very careful in giving this title. So first I'll give the author. The author is Jasper Fforde, Fforde, and the book is called Shades of Grey, not to be confused with the very popular questionable quality book with a similar title. This is Jasper Fforde's Shades of Grey, and it is a piece of science fiction that imagines a society that is basically completely stratified based on the color spectra that people can see. And so the highest caste in society are those people who can see purple, and then it goes down to the grays who don't see any color at all. And Fforde's book is very funny. And so when I first read it, it kind of reminded me some of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And at the same time, the book has a remarkable depth to it that you get as you kind of move along with it. And so I think in the end, it's both a very funny, very fun read, but also really leaves you thinking at the end. Fforde wanted to explore the idea of what happens if you have a society where leadership is essentially determined by nothing having to do with leadership qualities at all. And he really grabs that ball and runs with it with this book.
Excellent, man. Thank you. Those are great recommendations. And just looking up Mander's books, it's funny to see how it sounded like such a current book. It's written in 1978. Yeah, and it sounds like it's going to fit even just what we're talked about technology today. So I love it when you can have a book that is kind of timeless and goes through different generations. So it'll be really interesting to read some of those. Thank you for that. Well, I can't thank you enough. I know it took us a while to kind of get together and make this work, but I'm glad it did. This was a fascinating podcast. I mean, it went for over an hour and it happened like very quickly. I couldn't believe we were talking.
Well, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm a fan of your podcast. So thank you for the invitation, and this has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. And anything you can do, just avoid Hornsby when you leave. It just makes your life better.
Brad, don't listen to him. He's trying to persuade you negatively, my ad.
I'm trying to help him. This is reciprocation at best. That you were so good to me, I'm helping you by giving you.
Isn't that what all social engineers say? I'm trying to help you.
Just trust me. Thanks, Brad.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Brad. It's awesome, man.
Great podcast minus Hornsby, but another great podcast.
He's doing a lot of really interesting research, and his part, particularly about the resisting of persuasion, I think is important for all of us.
Yeah, I just loved how much of what he did kind of so directly applied to our work. I also love the question. I'm glad you asked it again, because every time we have someone on and they're in this area or a different area of research, they're specialized in something, and everyone expects them to be able to resist it. And the answer is always the same. We get this all the time. People will be like, "Oh man, you must be so hard to social engineer because you're a social engineer." And the answer is no. I mean, look, I'm still friends with Dave after how much torture has he put me through for the last decade?
You are the easiest person in my life that I've ever social engineered. Let's throw that out.
I know. It's ridiculous, right? I mean, 3 books on it. I do this for a living. I run a company with 11 people, successful, and yet I fall for your stuff every time.
The only thing I've gotten better at is recognizing it after the fact.
You know what? I'm just that good at social engineering, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm okay, but I think I just fall for your stupidity all the time. I don't know why.
That's true. I'm very likable though, so it comes off that way. That's why.
Yeah, that's what it is, Dave. That's how likable you are. Anyhow, Twitter account for business is SOC Engineer Inc. You can follow me at Human Hacker. Michelle is Sultry Asian, as everyone knows. Ping is VLKYRI. And Dave is Hacking Dave. If you want to follow any of us on Twitter, I don't see why you'd want to follow Dave unless you want to be spammed by Hornsby and other things.
I don't do that quite often. I just do it to you, Chris. And I have some very entertaining things. Like I just got in a debate with Slack today. It was pretty awesome. And
I saw that. It was actually kind of funny. It was humorous. I was actually laughing. You were going to shut your whole office down because Slack was down. That was a little humorous.
I was pretty upset about it, but yeah, that's
fine. If you want to follow us on the web, it's social-engineer.org or social-engineer.com. And if you still live on IRC, it's irc.freenode.net, channel social-engineer. I think that is about every way you could possibly get a hold of us.
This was a great episode 732. Been very impressed. And
I'm impressed that you remember the fake number you made up at the beginning.
Isn't that good?
I'm impressed by that. I am. I'll give you that one, Dave. Until next time, when we have all the great stories about Michelle falling 40 feet from a ropes course. That will be exciting. See ya.
On the 1st of November, and remember you were born